It is your Classic Metal Show right here on the ClassicMetalShow.com. That is Motorhead with We Are the Road Crew, and that is the theme song of our next guest, our new correspondent, our good friend Ken Barr. What's going on, Ken?
Hey, how's it going? I appreciate having a theme song.
You have a theme song, man. You got a book. You're a thespian like Chris.
Actually, I've got his book, and I've been reading it. It's awesome.
Yeah.
The Little Victories book. It's I'm going through a lot of the same kind of stuff, so it kind of hits home in a big way.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is it relatable to you?
Yeah, we haven't signed papers yet, so I really don't want to say a whole heck of a lot. But I'm at the tail end of a long divorce.
Yeah,
and,
fucking bitches.
Very relatable. Yeah, so yeah. I'll leave it at that for now.
All right, enough of this fun topic.
Yeah, let's go to a little bit more uplifting. Actually, one of my old road brothers just texted me, Todd Concessori. He's a guy, I know we talked about doing like a road crew roundup one day. He's a guy I grew up with him, and he's done Manson and just everybody. He's one of the top guys in the business, so let me give him a shameless plug right there. But he's somebody we should definitely, when we do the road crew roundup, he'll be a family member.
Sure. Well, Ken, talk about that a little bit since you brought it up. What differentiates being a top guy in the business versus not being a top guy? Is it just the tours that you get, or is it the body of work, or a little of both, or what?
It's the tours you get are a reflection of the work you do. It's the work ethic. It's the not getting caught up in the lifestyle. It's the, being there on time and giving 110% every day. Hey, there's 5 hot chicks that want to suck dicks, but you're going to go and do your job instead. It's just a dedication to the show. The show has to come first, otherwise all that other stuff, it will never be there. There's not going to be hot chicks if there's not a show. There's not going to be whatever. So it's a work ethic. It's a lifestyle. It's who you are at your core. It's being there for the show every day, And the guys I grew up with, Todd and Ramey and a bunch of the other guys, they've all continued in the business because that's who they are. And I'm real proud of all of them. I left for personal reasons 14 years ago, and these guys have persevered, and they've continued to work. Big Charlie Milton, Vinny Kowalski. These are guys that have gotten gig after gig because it's, show up ready for the Super Bowl every day. This isn't, spring practice. This is Super Bowl every fucking day, and we come loaded for bear. We're ready to go, and we're going to knock it out of the ballpark. So those are the top guys. The nature of the economy, sometimes the top guys don't always have gigs because there just aren't always enough jobs to go around, but they're still regarded as top guys, whether they're, are working a smaller tour or, an arena tour. I mean, it's the professionalism is who you are, and that is everything in the industry. And your reputation is what will keep you working or will prevent you from working. And the fact that these guys that I grew up with are still out there, all these years later, still just knocking it out night after night, it's a testament to who they are. They're not just my family. They're good. They're some of the best in the industry.
Sure. Well, Ken, here's something from a technical point of view that I've always wondered, especially for these larger arena shows like a Kiss or something like that. Obviously prior to the tour hitting the road, you guys do some quote unquote dress rehearsals, as it were, and you do the stage setup and the stage breakdown. How many times do you do that in drills, prior to actually hitting the road for loading trucks, unloading trucks, getting it set up on a mock stage or, using a venue of some kind to do the staging and then break it down? How many times do you do that before you go, okay, I think we got it?
Usually there's only 1 or 2 times. You'll load into an arena. Like my first tour with Kiss was the Revenge Tour, and the Stabler Arena was the first show of the tour, so we loaded in a few days before, and we only got the one loadout. We figured it out and went from there. The Kiss, the reunion tour, which was the last thing I did with them, we loaded out and loaded straight into the weenie roast and then loaded that out, and we were still figuring it out as we went.
Oh, wow.
But typically, everything pretty much you can figure it out. A stage is a stage is a stage. It's going to load out the same no matter what. It's going to take up X amount in the truck. The sound company already have a CAD drawing. They know what they need in the truck because their stuff is modular. It goes the same way. So the only variables are really the carpentry, the set, the hydraulics with KISS, that kind of thing. And the stage manager and the production crew will, work that out from experience. They'll know that this will take up about this much room. And then you just refine it maybe at the first gig or the second gig. But by then you're ready to go and you've got your loadout ready to go. What I used to do is for backline, which is the band gear equipment cases, I would number them. They'd have their manifest number, but I'd do a gaffer tape number on them, 1 through 50. And that was the order they went in the truck. Anybody can line those up for me. And I'd be in the truck, just send them in the number order. This is not rocket science. And we'd have our truck loaded in 20 minutes.
Wow. Look at you.
Yeah, again, these are people that have done it 100 times in 100 situations. So, these are people that are well paid, but you're saving money because of your labor costs because they know what they're doing.
Right.
And they bring all that experience with them, so they know where they can finagle a couple of extra cases or put something on the tail of another truck, and they've done it before. And that's again what makes these people some of the best out there.
Right. Well, I know that you do the actual harder labor, the lumping of the equipment, as it were, but I'm sure that you've had your opportunities to hang around maybe like the sound booth where the sound engineer works and whatnot. And, I'm not going to ask you to name names, but are you aware of, and this is a complaint that I've heard, well, Chris and I have both heard this for years, that an opening act is deprived of lighting or sound or whatever. The headlining act sends the word down, don't give them full PA, don't give them full lights, or don't give them this. Are you aware of those situations happening?
Absolutely. And it comes down to, you're the support act. You're not paying for it. The headlining act is. So that stuff is always worked out ahead of time. You're not contractually going to get the full light rig. You're not contractually going to get the full sound system. Maybe if, a guy from the support act is buddies with somebody in the headlining band, they might, bend that a little bit. But for the most part, it's the headlining act show. It's their tour. You're not going to get fucked. You're not going to not get anything or have people give you shitty sound. You're just not going to get the full experience because that's for the headlining band. That's done quite a bit. And, I personally agree with that because, we don't need Joe Nobody and his friends as the support act getting the full PA, and then when the headliner hits out there, it's like, oh, that's about the same. So it's it all goes down to paying your dues. It's all part of it. Sure. Although Todd, who's listening right now, may have a different opinion of that, what I just said, but that's been my experience. I heard. What was it? I think when Vince Neil was opening for Van Halen, he was doing so well that halfway through the tour, he started getting full PA, but just because he was selling a lot of tickets. So things happen.
Yeah, but they could have turned his PA off, at least on his mic. Jesus, that guy's awful.
Well, yeah. You're invited, but your friends can't come. Yeah, it's a real fucking classic there.
Nice. Well, Ken, I want to talk a little bit about the book, and you can share as much or as little as you want from the book, but I spent a little time this week going through, I've kind of read your book in pieces. I haven't read it from start to finish, so to speak, but you know what, I open it.
That's exactly how I wrote it, so you could pick it up, grab a couple of pages, put it down.
Yeah, exactly. And the one chapter that I really found, I think, of everything I've read so far, which is just about all of it at this point, is the part that I found probably most interesting just because it showcases kind of what we were talking about, as far as building your reputation, was the transition point when Eric Singer left Alice and joined KISS. and then Kiss decided to do that club tour. That's pretty famous club tour because it was Kiss at their height. And that was when you joined up with Kiss initially, was for that. I mean, you went to NAMM and then you did that club tour. Yeah. How did that all play out for you? And did that almost feel sort of, I don't want to say step down because that's definitely the wrong thing, but did that sort of feel like you were going in the wrong direction when Kiss initially started with a club tour instead of going from the bigness of Alice to even bigger with what everybody expects from Kiss?
No, it didn't feel like a step down because I understand the psychology of what they were trying to do. They were at a point where it was a transition point for them, and whether or not they could have, the record wasn't out, and they wanted to get out and play. And what they did was they created a buzz. They created mayhem in every city, and they made the news in every city. And so I understood the marketing aspect of it. And I'm a Kiss fan from way back, so to work for them doing clubs. I think the thing was they were choosing to do clubs, which I thought was ballsy. It wasn't like they couldn't play any place bigger. They chose to go out and create mayhem, to break in a new band member. And I tell you, though, the shows at times were difficult because Eric was on an 8x8 riser. I don't know if we've talked about it or not, but I used to swing his vocal mic in and out because he'd sing backups, but then the microphone would be in his way for drumming. So I was on that riser with him with his monitor. He wore earplugs, and his monitors were so fucking loud. And a lot of times the drum riser was against the back wall of the club, so I had nowhere. I was, basically hugging him. The first show, I think, was at the Troubadour or one of those places, and I was about deaf by the time the show was over. And that's when I started wearing earplugs. And that's also the first show he tried a headset microphone, and it didn't work. It wouldn't stay on him. So we were about 3 songs in, and we had to go to a microphone on a boom that I would swing in and out. And I was a Kiss fan, so I knew all the songs. That wasn't an issue, but I was always in close proximity to him up there. And the other thing was, this used to scare the living hell out of me, is our cases were made for arenas. A lot of these clubs, we couldn't bring them in there. So you'd be unloading and handing stagehands, here's Gene Simmons' guitar, here's Eric's drum. And, theft was such a big deal back then.
Sure.
So getting everything on the load in and the load out was literally, frightening because you couldn't be at the stage area, at the hallway, at the truck. You couldn't cover it all. And it was, that part was stressful, just making sure everything, hadn't been stolen at the end of the night because, you can't have that.
Right.
So, no, I was proud of the gig. I knew what the gig was going to turn into, and it did. So I was thankful for it. And like I said, it was, an arena's worth of crew. They brought out all top people. They didn't skimp. They spent money on us. They put us in good hotels. We made our arena money, and we went out. We banged it out in clubs with one of the biggest bands in the world. I except for the stressy parts, I had a great time, and it was kind of less pressure, doing my first shows with Kiss in a club because, it was a huge step up for me. And the clubs were difficult, but it was still just a club, I mean, it's still Kiss. You don't want to fuck up.
Right.
Oh, sorry, Eric. I didn't mean to drop that or fuck that up. But no, I knew it was all good. And like I said, they didn't have to play clubs. They wanted to. They wanted to go out and create mayhem, which is what they're about. They created a buzz and broke the new drummer in a great way. And, the fans loved it. I, had a good time, and it was a good start. So I'm all good with that.
Sure. Now, was Eric playing in the clubs? Was he playing his full kit? Because he has such a big kit. At least it seems big. When you see him play live, was he able to play that big of a kit on an 8x8?
Yeah, the kit he was using then was the double kick, 2 rack toms, 2 floor toms, and a ride cymbal, a cowbell, and I forget exactly how many cymbals, but he had I think 8 crashes aside, so that would be 16, plus the little guys upside down on top. But yeah, he used his full set on the 8x8, and it worked. It was just tight because, I had, his water. He used to drink Pedialyte. I don't know if he still does, just so he could hydrate quicker. I had a bunch of different stuff that he needed up there. Plus, I was up there, so it was cumbersome, and I'm not a little guy. So, here's this 6-foot-tall, 250-pound guy squatting down next to your microphone trying to look, not be seen. It's just, it ain't working. It's like fucking Barney the dinosaur in the middle of the stage.
So do you still have his kit cataloged and numbered in your head there, Ken?
I remember his kit because I truly did love the gig, and I loved how he played. Well, I still do. And he used to, he experimented with a 10 and I think a 13. Anyway, 2 more racks on his left-hand side that he would throw in. And he kept taking those away, and I kept trying to ask him to put them back, and he uses them now, so I'm real happy about that. I still respect his kit. On Revenge, he had a kit that was made of a material that looked like mirrors, but it was actually some kind of a polymer or something. And I had to use this special cleaner he got that race car drivers use on their windshields. And it would take me, just to clean 2 racks, 2 floors, 2 kicks, it would take me like 2 hours just to get those 6 done. And then I'd worry about, get a stagehand to do cymbals and wipe down the stands and whatnot. But, I love that kit. And, he's a great player, so what's not to love?
Well, I tell you what, Ken, anybody who doesn't get your book and read it, especially, with the stories that you tell here, they're probably missing out, especially if they're a fan of live music. Because, a guy like you definitely have something to share that the average person just doesn't get to experience.
I appreciate that. You guys have been great supporters. Sorry I'm so raspy. I'm kind of fighting a cold flu or something. Not really sure. I'm going to ride the NyQuil Express as soon as we hang up later. So it's not that I smoked a bowl or anything. I'm just a little raspy.
Well, are you enjoying the Classic Metal Show, Ken? Now I'm going to pat ourselves on the back.
Yep, absolutely.
What you've
you
heard.
Guys, I heard some of the stuff. I tuned in at 9 today, and I was listening to you guys. And, it's nice to have honesty. It's nice to have, people that don't give a fuck about, their opinions being questioned. And it's the way rock and roll used to be, and it's a cool thing. So I try to listen when I can. I've had a little bit of a crazy schedule lately, but no, I totally support you guys in what you're doing. Absolutely. Actually, I've got to pick up a T-shirt because I am going. One of the things I wanted to mention to you guys is I'm going to start doing live shows again.
Awesome.
The first thing I'm doing is a cruise called 70,000 Tons of Metal. I don't know if you guys have heard of it or aware of it.
Sure.
But it's a music cruise going out of Miami to Jamaica and then back. It's 4 days out, 60 bands, 4 stages, 120 shows, and I'm going to be one of the stage managers, and it's going to be awesome.
Well, at least you're not lumping the gear.
No, you know what, though? I'll be in there with it if need be, because we're going to have probably 15 bands a stage each per day, and you're going to be doing changeovers and keeping it going. There's a lot of good bands, Apocalyptica, Arch Enemy, Cannibal Corpse. Actually, Michael Schenker's Temple of Rock is playing, and Doogie White, who I toured with in Rainbow, is the singer, so I'm looking forward to seeing Doogie again. And it's just a lot of good. It's heavier stuff than I normally listen to, but I'm looking forward to checking out music that I haven't really been exposed to so far. So it's going to be an awesome, and I'm looking to do more of this kind of stuff. And I'm making some decisions about maybe doing a lot more of this kind of stuff. So I'm just thankful for the opportunity.
Well, I hope the paperwork of your impending divorce is behind you, so none of that cruise money gets swept into the mix.
No, I think we actually have been very civil and come to a final agreement. So I think we're not that I'm not making 70,000 tons of money on this. But you know what? They're paying me well, and if they weren't paying me well, I'd still go out and do it because it's been a long time since I've done rock shows, and it's part of who I am. It's been 14 years. It's time for me to start getting back out there and doing some shows and kicking some ass a little bit with my brothers.
Sure. Now, talk about that a little bit, Ken, about how that works. Now you're deciding to get back into it. Do you? Is there somewhere that guys like you go and say, "Hey, I'm available for tours," or Is it all word of mouth, or how does the word get around so that, whoever, Kiss or Lynch Mob or whoever that's going on a tour might give you a call and say, hey, we're going out for 30 days. Can you come and manage our tour?
Well, for me, I go on the Classic Metal Show and make the announcement, hey, Ken Barr needs a job.
Yeah, we're we're influential
Ken
that
Barr,
way.
Actually, I have enough buddies out there, enough brothers out there. I put the word out. I'm starting slow. One-offs here and there is probably how I'll start. It's been a long time, so, it's like anything you've been away from for a while. It takes a while to kind of get that muscle memory back. I've definitely got to drop a couple of pounds. I've been going to the gym every day. And, I'm not reliant on it for my livelihood, so I can just kind of put the word out there and let people know. And if a one-off here and there comes up, that's fine to start. My day job, I get 8 weeks off a year, so I have plenty of time to just go bail and go do stuff. And that's what I'll do. I'll talk to the people I've known my whole life that have always been there for me, and they'll be the ones that'll, put the word out and help take care of me. And even if it's a one-off here and there, it becomes a matter of sanity, about doing the shows, because, I miss the satisfaction of putting that last case in the truck. The truck is closed. It was an ass kicker of a show, and off to the bus for pizza and beer. The satisfaction of walking the arena in the morning when there's nothing, watching the riggers hang their points, and watching the whole thing evolve, because I would always be out there on the floor all day. And then, walk the empty arena having showered, and it was a great feeling, and that's, it's a feeling I really want to get back to. So,
sure. Now, what would it take for you? You said it sounds like you got a pretty decent gig, and you got a lot of vacation time, obviously. What would it take for you to go back full time to working in the road crew?
Be a lot of thought. I've got variables in my life. I have been working real hard with writing. I've written other books that we haven't talked about, and I've been making short movies. So it would take a lot of introspection on my part to because I'd have to put that stuff on hold somewhat. But then again, it would also, going back out on the road full time would make me more relevant, and I could do another road crew book and revise the one I've already done, and have a whole new market. So it would take the right opportunity. It would take, it would just take a lot of thought on my part as well, because it's a big commitment. I'd love to work with Alice Cooper again, but he tours over 10 months a year, and I don't know that I would want to be away that long. If Kiss came up, if Eric's got a great tech, and I hope that Paul, works forever. But, if I could work for Eric again, I'd consider it. But again, it would be, how long, and it'd take a lot. It's going to take a lot for me to be full time again. That's why right now doing this cruise, there's other cruises I'm going to try and do, and kind of getting the shallow end of the pool. The 8 inches of deep, 8 inch deep, like you guys were talking about earlier. I'm going to wallow in the 8 inch for a little while on 70,000 tons of metal, and then, I'll put a little bit more water in the pool, and maybe go do a one-off or something and see how the pool feels. And, when the pool is deep enough where I can urinate and nobody knows, then we'll see where we go.
Just as long as they don't have that blue dye in there.
Yeah, well, the trick to that is just swirl around quick; it'll dissipate. So I'm good with that too. Kick your legs; it'll dissipate.
Right, absolutely.
So yeah, it's a lot of thought, and it's a lot of prioritizing. Like I said, it would come down to. I'd love to get one of those great country tours where they go out for 2 weeks, come home for a week, out for 2 weeks. I would do that tomorrow, but so we'll see. We'll see what comes down the pipe, and I'll take what opportunities come, and if it feels right, I'll go for it, and if it doesn't feel right, I'm perfectly fine where I am right now.
Right.
So really, I'm in a good position. So we'll see.
Well,
I'm optimistic about the future.
Well, what's the oldest road crew member that you're aware of?
The oldest road crew? Yeah. Well, I know I had a stage manager who was like a dad to me. His name was Putter T. Well, his road name was Putter T. He's probably about 10 years older than me, so he's probably early 60s. I think he's not out there anymore, though. So if you're asking about guys that are still out there, I'm not really sure. A lot of the guys I toured with, I mean, the guys my age or younger are still out there, but the guys a little bit older than me have all kind of worked into more corporate situations. I think that's the smarter thing to do, is to kind of work yourself into a, 9 to 5 or, whatever, steady gig, so that, the road does tear you up.
Sure.
And if I did go back out, it wouldn't be for any length of time. It'd be no, 10 years deal. I mean, I'd just like to do one or two more rodeos, but it takes its toll on your body, so the wise ones get out, when you can't do it anymore.
Right. Absolutely. I've seen some of those guys who, they look like death warmed over, and they've got, wraps around their knees, and they're just kind of limping along there, and,
Yeah. It's a very physical job.
Sure. Absolutely. So it's just like, dude, it's time to hang it up, don't you think?
Well, a lot of people just enjoy it so much, and a lot of people don't make provision. They're working day to day. They get used to a certain level of income and aren't really able to do anything else. And you find yourself in that position where okay, one more tour, and there's no options for you. That's why, I left. I was 37 when I did my last tour, and I probably should have hung in there another 5 years, but that's not where my life was, and I guess maybe that's why I still want to go out and do it. I've always thought, you guys were talking about if you had a hunk of money, I always thought it would be cool to have, get a tour bus and rent out 12 bunks and follow a tour. That'd be a vacation for me. Go out for a week, do the load in, eating, catering, load out, back on the bus for pizza, and let's ride to the next gig. I'd pay for that.
Nice. Definitely.
Well,
Ken, as a tech, certainly I'm going to make an assumption here. You can tell me if I'm right or wrong, and you don't have to name any names, and I don't want you to. But I have to assume that guys in your position follow along, not necessarily with what bands are doing. I'm sure you don't give a shit if this band's releasing a new record or this, other than the fact that they're going to be out on tour. But do you follow along enough to know which guys have a reputation for being, difficult or douchey or whatever word you want to use, and then maybe try to not work with them? Or do you have a list of guys that you've just heard from people you trust that you wouldn't work for?
Yeah, there's a couple that word gets out pretty quick if somebody's going through good techs quickly. Word definitely gets out. All the road guys talk, and if there's a guy out there who's a pain in the ass or who you don't want to do it, people will tell you, dude, don't take that gig, it's hell. And I wouldn't want to name names on that one, but it's absolutely, we warn each other, because if the gig sucks, it's hard being out there. It's not all lines of blow and blow jobs. It's a lot of hard work. You're away from your home. You're away from your support system. Half the fucking time you don't know what day of the week it is or where you are, because you're in a concrete building every day. And, loading the trucks and unloading the trucks, yeah, you've got stagehands, but if you give a shit, you're there guiding them, so you're still busting your ass. That's all hard enough. You don't need some prick up there bitching about because he's having a bad day. I toured with one group where the first tour I did with them, I fought with the guitar player every night. I almost quit more than once. And we worked it out, and then, we're actually good friends now, but I was fucking miserable. We're doing Jones Beach, which is an amphitheater in New York, and, my wife is at the sound booth watching, and the band go into the first two chords of Plush, their big song, the big fucking hit, and he starts waving his arm for the band to stop, and he comes running over at me like he's going to take a swing. He broke a fucking string and was pissed off, and I gave him another guitar. I said, get the fuck back out there. And, my wife's got an instant migraine. I think Todd was out there, and they're like, Jesus fucking Christ, they're going to go at it. And, but, eventually it smoothed out. Some of these guys, they're not used to the road. They get too big too fast. And, it is what it is. But, things work out in the end. But, yeah, some guys are just pricks, and, we do talk, us road crew guys. So, You know, if you are a musician and you are a prick, we all share that. And, you know, if people do take the gig, they're going to ask an exorbitant amount of money to put up with the bullshit. And that's usually people will try and price themselves out of the gig. And if you get the gig anyway, you're like, well, I'll just bite my lip and, you know, count my money. So unfortunately, it does happen.
How difficult is it to deal with bands or band guys? And maybe you haven't had this happen, but I have to assume with as long as you've done it that you probably have. How difficult is it to deal with a band member when you're, you know, teching specifically for a band member that has a substance problem?
I've never teched for a band member directly that had a substance problem. We had some really rough FTP shows because Scott was having a problem, and there were nights where he wasn't hitting his notes, and he'd try and come over and tell me the guitars are out of tune. I'm like, no, motherfucker, it ain't the guitars. He's really the only one. I've been fortunate. I haven't been around a lot of that. I mean, I've known guys that did blow, but that's just fun. That's a party. That's, you know, you can still do your gig. You know, well, that's the 80s talking. No, blow's bad. Never do blow. So aside from that, I haven't really had a hard time, you know, as far as that goes. I've heard of people with nightmares. You know, guy can't go out there and do his job, and he's going to blame his tech first. Then he's going to blame the sound guy and the monitor guy. You know, it's everybody's fault but his. But, you know, like I said, that area I've been lucky. I've heard horror stories, but I've personally been very, very lucky. So I've got no complaints there.
Excellent. All right. Well, Ken, you know, obviously, I'm sure you wouldn't mind selling a few books. Not that you're dependent on it, but it's nice to get out there. So where can people find out and get your book?
Oh, Amazon.com. We're on Kindle and Audible.com, iTunes, pretty much anywhere. Just feel free to stop by our gift shop on your way out.
Nice. And you don't have an official website, do you?
You know what? That was on my New Year's list to consolidate everything, because I've got stuff for books, I've got stuff for movies, I got to consolidate into one big website. So that's on the watch for that. There's going to be KenBarr.com is taken, so I've got some coin collector guy's got it, and he won't give it up. So I've got to figure out something that'll tie in books, music, movies, and all that. So I will have one, and the next time we talk, which I hopefully will not be that long, I will definitely have something, and we'll put an official one out there.
Yeah, Aiken IT Services. Aiken IT Services.
Yeah.
Selling my web business, thank you. No, well, Ken, why don't we do this? Why don't we plan on you calling in right after the 70,000 tons of metal and get a report on how the shows went?
Yeah, that works. You want me to call you guys, or?
Well, I'll email you and we'll set it up, and I'll actually honor the emails this time.
That's cool. Yeah, because I had a bunch of notes for stories and whatnot, but, you know, we can hold those off too and, you know, keep this going.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, you don't need to blow your wad all at once. I mean, we plan on having you for a long time to come.
Well, I appreciate that. The 70,000 tons of metal is going out of Miami and going to Jamaica and back January 22nd to the 26th.
Awesome.
And the website it's 70,000tons.com. It's number 70,000tons.com. Going to be a lot of heavier artists, and I'm looking forward to being exposed to stuff I haven't checked out before. So, if any of the bands are listening, bring extra CDs because Ken Barr needs one.
Nice. Well, Ken, we appreciate you always coming on the show and telling us some good stories and giving us a lot of insight that, you know, your average music fan may never get about the business of rock and roll and touring and, you know, working behind the scenes, you know, just paying for a ticket and, you know, putting your ass in a seat. There's a lot that goes into that to make that happen for them. So it's kind of cool.
I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys having me on. It's a good outlet, and you guys are awesome. I love what you're doing.
Yeah, well, we're badasses. We're the badasses of radio and rock and metal and everything that's real.
Well, somebody's got to be.
That's right.
And I'm sure I'm going to hear from Todd as soon as I hang up. So, you know, maybe later on in the far off distance, we'll do, you know, that roadie roundup we talked about and have a couple of the guys call in for a long one.
Sure.
I definitely want to do that. I definitely want to have, over the course of a show, even just do that. That'd be great.
Oh, I mean, the guys I grew up with would be an awesome bunch, and it's just funny. I mean, the club shit we did, because where we grew up, the clubs were massive, and you were working 6-7 nights a week, and it was just, arena-style shows crammed into these bars with all homemade stuff, and it was awesome. And we all cut our teeth there. We learned our craft there, and yeah, there's a lot of good stories there.
All right, Ken. Well, again, we appreciate you taking the time. And since you worked with Alice Cooper, probably one of the heaviest albums he ever did, which surprised me when this CD came out, was Brutal Planet.
I love that disc.
Just a hard rockin' CD, and I was just like, wow, Alice has really stepped it up here. Why don't you pick a tune off that?
Title track, Brutal Planet, rocks.
Yeah, it does rock. All right, Ken, well, we'll catch up with you again. Go buy Ken's book over there at Amazon.com. We Are the Road Crew by Ken Barr. And here's Alice Cooper with Brutal Planet exclusively here. What, Ken?
The Classic Metal Show.